Good to go.
All right. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And on behalf of the Village of Kerry and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on this Thursday, November the 12th, 2020, at approximately 7:05 p.m. We have a quorum of members, and at this time, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Brian Simmons, to please call the roll.
Williams?
Here.
Kretschmer?
Here.
Graziano?
Here.
Jasper?
Here.
Dudek?
Here.
O'Loughlin?
Here.
Walrath?
Here.
Corey?
Here. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to rise with us for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So thank you, everyone. So before we begin, I know there's a few of you here that are interested in a couple of the petitions, and for those of you that have not gone through this process before, the way we typically do our meetings is we ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Brian Simmons, to give us an overview of the petition, and then when he concludes, we may have questions for Mr. Simmons. Once we close that portion, in the first case, Mr. Simmons is acting on behalf of the community, so that should be very simple. But on the fourth petition, Mr. Crowley, usually what we do is we ask yourself to add any additional color, for example, on the petition itself, if you choose to. And again, the ZPA members may have some questions for yourself. Once we close that portion of the meeting, we open it up to the public. And if the public has any questions or comments, you're welcome to address us. All we kindly ask is, you saw the sign-in sheet at the back of the room, that's a public document. And when you come to the podium, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for the record. These proceedings do get recorded. And for those of you that are unaware, that are listening to this at a future date, it's a hybrid meeting tonight. Some of us are assembled here in Village Hall, and some are obviously online. Once we close the public portion, the ZPA members may have some additional discussion about the petition. We take a vote, and then that vote gets delivered to our elected officials who make the final decision. So that's our process. So I think you were here before, Mr. Crowley, to see this process before. But before I do an administrative matter, do you have any questions about this at all?
No, sir, I'm not Mr. Crowley.
Oh.
Mr. Crowley is the building owner. We're the tenant.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Yeah, and I'm sorry, then, I thought we had met once before.
Yes, we have. This is Meredith. I'm Randy.
Randy.
I came for a few past meetings.
Yeah, thank you very much, and apologies for confusing that.
Don't let it happen again.
All right, noted.
I'm
You
joking.
must know Mr. Graziano. Sounds like me. All right, so thank you very much. So, gentlemen, you would have received your package, and before I ask for general consent of the meeting minutes for ZPA case 09001, I just want to double check that everybody did in fact receive their packets.
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
All right. So the chair, via voice vote, will seek general consent for the meeting minutes dated October the 8th, 2020. The property address was the 470 Mildred Ave, and this was for Pam and Ray Morey for the variance to increase the maximum ground floor area for their detached garage. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. So we're now going to proceed to our first case, which will be the Village of Kerry. It's a request to map amendment rezone from E1 to PO Park District. The location is 1300 Clausen Road, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The request this evening, as mentioned, is for a map amendment related to the Rotary Park property. I'll give a brief overview of the request in a few slides, but essentially we're seeking to rezone the property to a zoning district similar to the rest of the site. Brief history for the property. The subject property that's subject to rezoning this evening was historically within the Village of Algonquin's jurisdiction. And the community had granted a conditional use permit for mining of the southern portion of the site. In 2008, the Village of Kerry amended or passed a conditional use permit for the expansion of mining further to the north into the Village of Kerry, and it also included plans for the restoration of the property. In 2017, mining of the entire Rotary Park property was completed, and in 2019, the restoration of the site was also completed by Meyer Material, and subsequently following the restoration of the property, the entire site was deeded to the Village of Kerry. This resulted in property that was owned by the Village of Kerry being located both within the incorporated limits of the Village of Kerry and also the Village of Algonquin, which is the portion of the site, the southern site along Clausen Road. Earlier this year, the Village of Kerry and Algonquin entered into intergovernmental agreement that dictated the terms for disconnecting that property from Algonquin and then annexing it into the Village of Kerry. That process was completed this summer. I believe in June or July, the property was officially annexed into the Village of Kerry and is now part of the corporate limits of our community. Based on zoning regulations within the Village of Kerry, due to the size of the parcel when it was annexed into the village, it automatically defaulted to a specific zoning district. Since it was over 1 acre in size, defaulted to our E1 single-family residential zoning district. The petition that's presented before you this evening is seeking to rezone that property from that E1 zoning classification to the village's PO Parks and Open Space District. That district zoning classification would be similar to other park properties within the village, which include in the immediate area the Fox Bluff Conservation District property off of Kerry Algonquin Road, the Hoffman Park property to the north of the site, and also the remainder of the Rotary Park property, which is to the north of the subject parcel, as shown in the slide here. The UDO includes various standards that need to be met in order to justify map amendments or changes to the zoning classification or zoning map for the village, which are summarized in the slide. In general, the amendment is not detrimental to the orderly development of the village, should not be detrimental or endanger the public health. Property not generally suitable for uses permitted under existing zoning classification, and the trend of development in the general area supports the request, are just a few of the items summarized. Staff did provide a response to the standards within the packet of information you have before you this evening. Staff does believe that the proposed amendment will comply with those standards and recommends that the zoning board, if they concur with the recommendation, recommend to the village board approval of a map amendment to rezone the Rotary Park property located at 1300 Clausen Road from the E1 Single Family Residential District to the PO Park and Open Space District. And in conjunction with that recommendation, would also recommend an amendment to the Village of Kerry Comprehensive Plan, the future land use map, to designate the property for parks and open space for the subject property. The subject parcel that's subject to the rezoning is not identified at all within the comprehensive plan, as when the comprehensive plan was developed, was in the Village of Algonquin, so we did not have planning jurisdiction over that property, but the proposed land use designation would be consistent with the rest of the property for parks and open space, and would ensure that the property under the new zoning classification would be utilized for park uses going forward. I'll be happy to answer any questions the board may have regarding this request.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Gentlemen, questions for Mr. Simmons?
Not really, just an information question. How long has this been known as Rotary Park? It's the first time I've ever heard that name.
When the village received the property and we dedicated it, we
Open mics, you got open mics.
we had a ribbon cutting on the property last fall, and that's when we announced that it was named Rotary Park.
Okay, I must have missed that.
That's right. The sign was just put up on the park property, the entrance there, so that it now is identified as that way. But the village has worked with the local Rotary Club for the naming of the park, but also the Rotary is planning to do some improvements out there to assist with the development of the park.
Sounds good to me.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions. I just have a comment/statement I'd like to make.
Sure.
The park is very near and dear to my heart. I was on the board when there was a lot of conversations had about extended mining and eventually what this would become. I think a lot of people, both on the ZPA and on the village board, had to be visionaries to get it to the point that it is today. I happened to drive down the street just by accident about 3 or 4 days ago, and the sign was the first I saw it. So, I mean, it really slapped me in the face, and then I stopped back actually today to walk around. So it's a gorgeous amenity for the residents of the village of Kerry. I would encourage everybody to get a chance to go out there. And while I personally don't know if the board has continued to hear any comments negatively on it, I can't imagine that would be the case, because it turned out to be, I think, everything that a lot of people had hoped for. So congrats, Brian, to all the work that you put in. Patrick, obviously, you were part of the ZPA back in the tough times when this was being put together. And I think it's just a fabulous asset for the village of Kerry.
100% agree, Mr. Dudek, and I think I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to you in your former capacity for helping push the ball forward. So thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
Yep. So, gentlemen, before we potentially open up to the public, the gentlemen that are on via Zoom, do you have any questions for Mr. Simmons?
Nope. Nope.
Okay. What we'll do now, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to open it up to the public. I know there are a few people here that may or may not have some questions, and so for those of you that like to comment on the application, you're welcome to do so now. You simply approach the mic, state your name and address, and we'll go from there.
And really quickly too, for there's an individual that's online as well. If you'd like to speak, there's the raise your hand feature. So if you'd like to comment on this petition, you're able to utilize that raise your hand feature, and then we'll contact you or allow you to speak at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Please proceed, sir.
Hello, my name is William Carlson. I live on 9502 3rd Avenue, which basically backs right up to the Rotary Park. I just wanted to know if this is going to have any effect on my property or anything, rules or anything that change in my lifestyle by living right next to the park.
So, Mr. Carlson, one of the things I can tell you about this committee is we try to be an open-minded group, and I think you'll find if you come to these meetings regularly, we are. The public comments component, I should have mentioned this earlier, is not designed to be kind of a question and answer period between yourselves and ourselves.
Yes.
However, we do try to meet the common ground, so I'm going to ask Mr. Simmons if you'd like to comment a little bit on that question. But generally speaking, just for future reference, it's designed to allow the public to comment.
Sure.
And it's not designed for the person commenting to kind of do a Perry Mason moment where you're
Well,
kind of
no,
going
just
back
was
and forth.
wondering,
But the
yeah.
question's legitimate, so we're going to try to respond as best we can.
Right.
Yeah, so to answer your question, from a zoning perspective, your use of your property is governed under the McHenry County ordinances, zoning
Yes.
ordinances.
Right.
So your use and how you can develop your property is under their jurisdiction. This rezoning just dictates how the village can utilize its own property.
Oh, okay.
So there would be no impact on how you could use your property other than what the county
Sure.
currently regulates as your use. It just preserves more of the property that the village owns in Rotary Park as more of a park open space
Sure,
use.
sure.
So should that use ever change in the future, if something happens that the village sells the property or, changes it, that would trigger having to go back through a zoning process and notify surrounding property owners of that change.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Carlson, was there anything else?
No, that
okay.
I was just wondering what it was about. But I do love the park. It's a beautiful park.
We agree. Yeah, we agree.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
So I'm Marilyn Carnahan, 9502 3rd Avenue. And when I got the map, I was just confused as to what part was being rezoned. And I think I saw one of the first maps that was flashed up. It's just the southern section along Clausen, the southern section. Yeah, there. Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure what area we were talking about, but that clarifies it. So that's all.
Sure, and that was just to back additional information. So the red outlined area is the parcel that the village owns. So there are property, or is property still along Route 31 that is in private ownership. And likewise, there's property that's along Clausen Road that's still in private ownership as well.
Yeah.
Those potentially could develop. Those are still within the village of Algonquin.
Okay.
So that area, if it were to develop, would be under Algonquin's jurisdiction. So if a developer came in to propose something there, again, surrounding property owners likely would be notified of that per their zoning regulations.
Okay, that answers it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So is there anyone else that would like to speak from the public on this petition? Okay, we'll close that portion of our...
There's one individual
Yeah,
online,
thank
sorry.
you, Brian. Mr. Simmons.
There's an individual that was online with the login as V71. Would you like to speak on this petition? If so, you can use the raise your hand feature. All right, if you would like to state your name and address for the record, and then you can provide comments to the zoning board. Yep. Can you hear us? He just muted his mic. To the resident online, can you hear us? Or your mic is muting and unmuting. I can't tell if you're submitting a question. If you'd like to submit a question, you can also use the comment feature online as well. See if I promote them. Let's see that.
Did they signal they wanted to speak, Brian, by raising their hand on that Zoom?
Yeah, they're. They're raising their hand, but then when they unmute their mic, I can't hear
Ask them if they can type out the question.
them. The resident online, would you be able to type your question online as well? And then I can read it to the zoning board online.
So, Mr. Simmons, while we're waiting for this, one of the questions I was going to ask you yourself, obviously a number of residents have been noticed in and around the park. Did anyone comment one way or the other on this request?
No, we did not receive any comments on this.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies to the resident that's online. If you, I can see you're muting and unmuting your mic, but we're not hearing any audio on this end. Would you be able to type in any comments you have into the question and answer portion of the program, and I'll be able to read those to the zoning board as well.
we're going to see if we can get them to call in. And failing that, we're going to move forward.
I can't have a note. For the residents online, I can give you my cell phone number as well, and then I'll be able to have you communicate from there. If you have a pen, you can write it down. It'd be 847-257-6177.
Might want to repeat it, Brian.
Yeah, I can. Again, that cell would be 847-257-6177. I can't send them a note through the system.
It's still there.
They're still logged in, yeah. All right, one more time then. Again, the phone number, if you need it, is 847-257-6177.
I'm going to wait one more minute, and then we are going to close the public portion. You don't have anything to indicate one way or the other. All right, I think we gave that a good effort. And I'm going to assume that that person is not interested in communicating with us, Mr. Simmons. So at this time, I will close the public portion of this petition. And gentlemen, before I call the motion, is there any additional questions around this particular petition? Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of, one, a map amendment to rezone the southern 109 acres of the Rotary Park property located at 1300 Clausen Road from E1 to PO, and two, an amendment in the Village of Kerry Comprehensive Plan future land use map.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Simmons, would you call the roll?
Williams,
Yes.
Kretschmer,
Yes.
Graziano,
Yes.
Jasper,
Yes.
Dudek,
Yes.
O'Loughlin,
Yes.
Corey.
Yes. So, Mr. Simmons, you have a favorable recommendation from the ZPA. And I'll leave it with yourself of how you want to proceed.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
All right. So at this time, we will call now Village Case Number ZPA 10003. This is Kerry Consolidated School District. This is a conditional use for an electronic message center and monument sign. And Mr. Simmons, I'm assuming you're going to give us the overview, and then the school district is probably online?
Yes,
Yeah,
this
okay.
district is online. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The request this evening, as mentioned, is for a conditional use for a monument sign for the Deer Path Elementary School, which is along Crystal Lake Road on the north end of the village. The property is zoned E1, single-family residential district. And the sign is requested this evening requires conditional use approval, which would be village board final. Brief history in the property was annexed into the village of Kerry back in 1997 and was subsequently developed by District 26 for both the Deer Path Elementary School and the Kerry Junior High Schools shortly thereafter. The school district is proposing to replace the existing monument sign for the Deer Path School along Crystal Lake Road. They're proposing to add a electronic message center panel to the monument sign, as that panel was donated to them from a business in the community. In total, the square footage of the sign will be approximately 68 square feet, with the EMC panel comprising 39% of the sign face, or 27 square feet in area. As the zoning board is aware, the sign code provides provisions for the use and operation of electronic message center signs, which are summarized in the slide. Specifically, EMCs require conditional use approval. They're permitted only on monument signs within the village and cannot exceed 40% of the allowed sign area. Any messages that are displayed need to be static in nature, and then there's certain requirements for the illumination levels both during the day and evening hours. As the sign requires conditional use approval, there are certain standards that it would need to be met within the Unified Development Ordinance for its approval. Specifically, the use of the sign would not be detrimental to or endanger the public health. Use would not substantially diminish or impair the values of property within the immediate vicinity, and would not contribute to an overburdening of municipal services. The petitioner did provide information within the packet as far as how they believe the sign complies with the standards as proposed. And then based off the review of the dimensions and the conditional use or the use requirements for electronic message centers, staff believes the sign will comply with the village's regulations for their operation. Should the ZPA determine that the various standards have been met and concur with staff's recommendation, it is recommended that the ZPA recommend approval of a conditional use to the village board for an electronic message center sign for the property located at 2211 Crystal Lake Road, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have regarding this petition.
Thanks very much, Mr. Simmons. Gentlemen, questions for Mr. Simmons?
You're going to intend to remove the old sign, because I see that this one is located in a different spot.
I can have the petitioner provide a response to that. The location will change. The existing sign runs parallel to the roadway, and the new sign would run perpendicular to the roadway.
So it will be removing the sign.
Yes, the existing sign will be removed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, gentlemen? Mr. Dudek?
I do have some. First one, Brian, is for you. Does our sign ordinance stipulate what type of materials the signs have to be made out of?
Generally, the stipulation of the code is that it needs to match the material of the primary building. So the base of the sign would need to be of masonry construction to match the existing building on site.
So I have a comment or question. Signs, first a comment. Signs in general are a real hot potato. There's not a community that I've been associated with or that I'm not, or that I'm aware of that doesn't struggle over signage. In fact, we're going to talk about signage, in a few more minutes. For me, I prefer some level of consistency. So it would be great. I think the existing sign looks much like the high school sign because it's all brick, other than the fact that it has a message board. When I look at the architect's drawing, the Sinex information, I notice that the bottom of the sign appears to be brick masonry covered by flat-cut PVC, which I'm assuming is going to be something that looks like brick, but that's not brick. Is that the case, Brian?
So then the petitioner can provide more information on this too, but the base of the sign would be masonry, So it's what you're reading is the flat cut PVC is the portion of the sign that reads Home of the Comments. So it's that tagline will be on the brick portion of the lower portion of the sign, but the actual 36 inches that's above the ground would be masonry construction.
Okay, I asked the question, and the petitioner can clarify for us, because as you remember, a number of years back, we had billboards that were changed. And we thought we were getting brick. We didn't get brick as a village. And so, again, for consistency's sake, for quality of the look, I'm all for the electric sign. I have zero issues with that. And maybe I missed it, so shame on me. I didn't know the sign was donated. I'm not looking for the school to go through, any additional expenses. I just want to make sure that we're having some level of consistency, property type to property type. The high school, the school is on the same street. You'd like it to look sort of consistent. And maybe the petitioner can clarify for us that it's just the name that is going to be in some sort of plastic, but not that bottom panel like we have in the billboards.
Sure. Yeah, I can have them provide more information on that.
So that might be a good segue, gentlemen. Unless anyone else has questions for Mr. Simmons, I'm going to move to the petitioner. And on my paperwork here, I'm showing Mr. Tom Gippert potentially as the person responding here. Is that correct?
There's two individuals with petition. There's Matt Sinek with Sinex, and then also Tom Gippert. If both of them, either one would like to speak, you're able to unmute yourself and provide comments.
I can talk about a little bit of the history. This is Tom Gippert, the principal, so I can talk a little bit about the history of the sign, but in terms of the actual physical makeup of it, I think Matt might be able to do a better job than I can at this point. But yeah, so this sign has actually been about a 3 or 4 year project for us. We've been working with the PTO. We are very cognizant of trying to be good neighbors and be in line with everything that I understand the concern about being, in line with the rest of the community. So we are very open to, anything that would help us, move forward in that regard. In terms of the actual, like I said, the actual makeup, I think Matt might be able to answer that a little bit better than I can.
All right. So, Matt, if you're able to hear us, if you could comment further, that would be helpful.
Matt, you're muted. I'm going to ask to unmute you. Yeah, I see you're logging in with a phone. There you
Can you
go.
all hear me speaking?
We can.
Now I can, yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank God. To answer the question that Mr. Dudek was asking, the base of the sign is made of split-face masonry block that's similar to the building. And the only thing that on that base that's PVC plastic are the characters, the letter characters that say Home of the Comments.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So, did you have any further comments to the petition that you wanted to offer, gentlemen? Or I'm going to ask the members of the ZPA if they may have some questions for yourselves, in addition to Mr. Dudek's questions. All right, gentlemen, for those of you that are here and those of you that are online with us, do you have any questions for this petitioner? So, Mr. Gibbard, I do have one. You mentioned being a good neighbor, and in our packet here, we have a number of residents who were noticed around this project. Did you receive any feedback personally, positively or negative, around the request?
I have not, either way, positive or negative, I have not received any feedback.
Thank you very much.
There is one resident online still.
Okay. So what we'll do, everyone, is that I think what we'll do is we'll move forward toward public comment now. Mr. Simmons is advising me that we do still have some people online with us. So for those of you that are online, you saw we had some technical difficulties. So if you could raise your hand in the Zoom environment to let us know you'd like to comment on this application. I don't know if there's anyone physically here now in Village Hall that would like to comment. I'm seeing no. So we're just going to wait a moment to see if there's anyone online that would like to comment. Nothing. All right, so we will close that portion of our meeting. I'm not seeing anything from Mr. Simmons that would indicate that that person's trying to communicate with us. So gentlemen, before I call the motion, any other questions around this one? Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve a conditional use for an electronic message center sign for the property located at 2211 Crystal Lake Road, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Simmons, would you call the roll, please?
A question?
Please.
Just same question I have most of the time. The 6 conditions that we're adding to this are all part of the ordinance already. Now, I understand we're doing this for clarification and all that, but is it really necessary if it's part of the ordinance?
Yeah, it's part and practice, because we do have them sign and acknowledge the conditions as far as the approval and how they can operate the sign. And we have had some issues with how some of the signs are operated within the community. Once they're installed, they start to not comply with the regulations. So by adding those in as conditions to the ordinance, we have the petitioner sign it to acknowledge those conditions. It does help with the enforcement of it later on in the day, but I understand it is within the code. We're just backing up what's in the code, but it does help with the enforcement of it should there be an issue down the road.
Okay, it's got no problem, it's just, seems repetitive to me.
I understand. As I've said before, I understand. I appreciate it.
Okay, so Mr. Simmons, we will call the roll now.
Yes. Kretschmer,
Yes.
Graziano,
Yes.
Jasper,
Yes.
Dudek,
Yes.
O'Loughlin,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Corey.
Yes. So gentlemen, you have a positive recommendation. What my suggestion would be is to say close with Mr. Simmons. It will get put on the consent agenda, and I recognize we're dealing with some different times here. So I would just suggest perhaps tomorrow get a hold of Mr. Simmons and he can help you understand what next steps need to be taken.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and keep up the great work over there. We know the great work that you're doing for the community, so keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this will take us to our last case. And for those of you that are unaware, we did postpone a case because I think there was a notice issue that didn't get resolved. So we're going to proceed to the last case now, which will be...
Actually, if we could just really quick in that one, if we
Yeah.
can get a recommendation from the board to continue to that date.
Sure. So this is on our agenda, gentlemen, item number 5, Village Case Number 20-ZPA-1002. This is a notice to continue because it wasn't published in time, I believe, in the newspaper. And it's a variation for off-street parking. So the chair will entertain a motion to continue this case to December 10th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All in favor?
Yeah, just do a general consent. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, well, thank you, gentlemen. And now we're moving on to our last case, which is Village Case Number ZPA 10004. The petitioner is Hometown Scoop, Inc. The owner is Patrick Crawley. And this is a request variation for a wall sign inconsistent with existing signs in a multi-tenant building. The location is 395 Kerry, Algonquin Road, Unit E. And at this time, we'll hand it over to Mr. Simmons for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As mentioned, the request this evening is for a variation to the wall sign type. Per the village regulations, there are specifications for the type of signs that can be installed for various businesses, and the petitioner is seeking relief this evening related to the signs proposed for their proposed business. A brief summary on the property. The property is zoned B3 Fringe Business District and is located on the southwest corner of Industrial Drive and Kerry Algonquin Road. The petitioner is requesting a variance this evening for 2 wall signs that they propose to install on the tenant space. The property was annexed into the village back in 1978, and the subject shopping center was constructed in the mid-'80s. There was one variance history that the village or staff found for the property for another business that was located in the center, where they had a sign that was 50-50 mix of channel letters and a backlit portion of the sign. That variance was approved by the village board in 2006 for that sign type. Wall signs are regulated within Chapter 5 of the Unified Development Ordinance. The section of the code which specifies the parameters for a sign is shown on the slide, but essentially each business is permitted 1 wall sign per building frontage or unit of the building. The subject property is permitted 2 wall signs as it does face both Industrial Drive and Kerry Algonquin Road. And the petitioner is proposing to install 1 sign on each one of those 2 facades as they're allowed to do. The section 5.31, paragraph 5B, does provide additional regulations for multi-tenant buildings, specifically as the proposed business is located in the shopping center. Does require that multiple wall signs that are proposed for those businesses or buildings all utilize the same style, proportions, base colors, and be constructed of the same materials. This slide shows the proposed signage for both the business and then the existing signage within the shopping center, which is included within the staff report you have as part of the packets. The petitioner is proposing to, again, install 2 signs. That would be steel laser cut signs that would be wall mounted above the facade or on the facade, would have external illumination with gooseneck style lighting. The existing signs within the shopping center are primarily all individual channel letter signs, and some of them do include various logos as part of those signage. As part of the petition, the petitioner did provide a response to the variation standards which are included within the Unified Development Ordinance. Specifically summarized in the slide, that the hardship for relief that's required was caused by unique circumstances relating to the land and not the general conditions of the district. The applicant has not taken any action that has caused the extraordinary condition and made it substantially worse than it otherwise might have been, and the relief proposed will not alter the character of the locality. As part of the petition, staff did review variance history within the village to determine if previous requests of this nature have been supported by the village, and staff was unable to find an existing variance that was similar to this case. The variances that were in place were similar to the variance that was previously approved for this property for a individual channel letter sign, but that did have a portion of the sign that was backlit logo. Currently, we would review those without variance relief, as we would determine those are predominantly channel letter signs, so that if there's a tagline or a logo as part of the sign that is not individually letter but may have various wordage, we do classify that as still complying with the channel letter design. As the existing sign will differ significantly from the existing signage, and there hasn't been previous support for or relief granted for those types of signs, staff does not believe that the standards may be met in this case, but certainly if the zoning board does believe, based on information provided by the petitioner and the review of it this evening, should the zoning board recommend approval of the request, staff would recommend that the variance be subject to the conditions that are listed in the staff report, specifically if a variance to approve inconsistent wall signs in the multi-tenant building for Hometown Scoop Inc., doing business as a Kerry Dairy Ice Cream Cafe for the subject property, would be subject to the two conditions, that the variance be approved for the two wall signs as proposed, and that the wall signs proposed for both the north and southeast elevation not exceed the maximum 32 square feet in area permitted for the tenant space, and that the signs in general would conform to the plans and exhibits submitted as part of the petitions dated October 14th of 2020. Staff will be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this request. As per the UDO, this sign variation requests are ZPA final. So if a recommendation is made this evening, it will be final at the zoning board level.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons. Gentlemen's questions for Mr. Simmons?
I do have a
Go ahead,
question.
Mr. Dudek. I too have a few, so.
I guess comment also besides the question. So comment is just, again, personally, even if we were to go forward with this, the logo for the dairy, is it the, what I call like the cupola that Kerry has by the train station with the ice cream cone on top? Is that the trademark logo or something of this, or is this just a new logo that's been developed?
I think it's new.
I can have the petitioner provide that information, the response to that question.
Okay, and just to name and address, please, for the record. Yeah.
Of course. It's Randy Scott, and it's 28810 Christie Lane in Kerry.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
So if you don't mind, repeat the question.
So it's probably easier if I show you. This, with the ice cream cone on the top. This monument, if you want to call it a monument, is one of the first things you see when you drive into Kerry on Main Street. It's right by our train station. You're probably familiar with it. Possibly that's why you picked this. It's just my personal feeling. I think a lot of people associate that little structure with entering Kerry. I'm not so sure I like the idea of an upside-down ice cream cone on top of a primary piece of our village. That's just a personal opinion. So I was asking, is that the logo of your business, or is this something that was just created to open this business?
That logo was created about 6 months ago. It is the primary logo for the business. It's used in not only the sign, but in our main logo. So to address your concern about, I share your concern as well. It went through the process of, while making the logo, is it going to shed a negative light? Like, there's ice cream dripping on Kerry's logo, and we all love the water pump, right? That went through our mind, and after consideration and how much, we've lived in Kerry for a long time, we got independent consulting that gave us feedback, as well as the community gave us feedback that it does not shed a bad light on Kerry at all. If anything, it brings a sense of fun and community to it, to collaborate and it's wholesome.
Okay, I'll respect your opinion. We can.
No. That was just my answer for you, but I respect your opinion as well.
Okay, then I guess the only other comment that I have is, again, sort of similar to the last sign request we have. I'm not in favor of what you've requested. However, if that logo is important to you, I could see and probably support something similar that was done in the Allstate sign, where they have the Allstate logo next to the block and channel word Allstate, which is consistent with the other signage on that building. I think logos are important if there's an identity to a logo. I just don't want to see the whole sign essentially be that much different than the rest of the signs on the building. So again, to be clear, if you look at the Allstate sign where they just have, the good hands and then Allstate, if there was a way to make it circular or square or whatever might work, to have that logo incorporated along with block signage, that would be something I could support. But as proposed, I wouldn't support it.
Thank you
If
very
I
much,
may.
Mr. Dudek. I'm sorry, Mr. Scott, would
go
you want
ahead.
to?
Yeah, Mr. Dudek, I completely share your view with that. And it seems like you care greatly about the community of Kerry. And we intend on investing a lot back into Kerry, and well as being here for a while. And having said that, since we're going to be here for a while, the channel letters do age poorly. And the plastic vinyl, and as well as the surrounding, the little structure that holds on to the metal, ages very poorly, and I think that can be seen by the tenants that have been there for a while, especially if you mount them on a channel. The letters on the channel it decreases the holes in the facade, which is good for the building, but the channel, it starts to sag after a while. And since we're going to be here for a while, investing a lot of money into the community and being part of the community chamber, we'd like to see a more permanent sign to increase the value and overall how long it'll last.
Yeah, I'm only one of 7. I'm just voicing
No,
my thoughts. That's all.
1 of 7 is all. Every voice matters. So there you go.
Thank you, though, for sharing.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Dudek. Yeah, please, I'm sorry, who is this speaking?
This is Eric Kretschmer.
Thank you, Mr. Kretschmer, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't quite see what the hardship is, why you couldn't keep with the consistency of the rest of the shopping center. Can you explain to me what that is?
Yeah, the question asked, will this, can this property, correct me if I'm wrong, can you yield a reasonable return off this property with the existing sign? And the answer is, I'm not going to give you a false answer. The answer is yes. If we put channel letters, we're going to be successful. But Hometown Scoop Incorporated is looking to build multiple locations, and it's having a franchise model. And part of that franchise model is quality. And it's against our brand standards currently to go with channel letters on front facades. So to answer your question, it might not be a hardship with the specific property, but to the actual overall company, it will provide a hardship moving forward for us.
So, Mr. Scott, you're saying that it's part of a brand, but this would be the first location on this brand, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Kretschmer, do you have additional questions you have for Mr. Scott?
No, that was it.
Thank you. Gentlemen, are there additional questions that people have? I'm trying to do this in a logical way because we were supposed to conclude with Mr. Simmons' comments, but now we're talking to the petitioner, so we'll continue.
To give an overview of the business or
Yeah.
petition first?
I looked at that and I said, 100 years ago when I moved here, there was a dairy, Kerry Dairy, and I don't know if you got any relationship to the Brownell family or how you got the name Kerry Dairy, whether that was branded or whatever, but
Yeah.
I look at that sign and I said, damn, that's Kerry, that's the water pump, and I like the whimsical ice cream cone on top of it. They seem to go together to me, but that's me. I'm weird anyway.
So maybe what we could suggest, Mr. Scott, is that I'm sure that Mr. Simmons gave an overview of the application. Traditionally, what we do is we ask the petitioner to add any additional color or comments they have around their request. So I know we're asking questions back and forth, but maybe just to step back for a second, if you want to help us understand more fully what you're trying to do here, and then we can still ask you some questions at the conclusion, if that's okay for you.
That's absolutely.
Yeah.
Meredith, would you like to say anything? No. Okay. I'm a Kerry firefighter, and I don't bring that up just to try to get this through. I respect your decisions either way, but I do night shifts a lot, and I'll sit outside and I'll stare at that building for many hours on end. And we want to do the best that we can for Kerry and bring in revenue for Kerry, especially in these trying times, and be here for a long time moving forward. So to shed more color, what would you like specifically about this sign?
Well, no. I just wanted to make sure we were giving you the opportunity because
Yeah.
it began with some questions. And typically what we ask the petitioner to do is just to provide additional insights
Yeah.
as their request. I think you've got a good idea going here. That's
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
That means a lot to us. I think you mentioned it earlier, Mr. Dudek, that the signs are a hot potato for villages. And I would agree with you. I mean, you see everywhere that signs are an issue, but I can assure you that we want the best for not only our business, but also the property. We want to raise the property value. The building owner is the nicest guy you've ever met. It's the nicest woman you've ever met that he's married to. Very family-owned people. So we would never do wrong to them, especially with how much they've helped us getting this property going. And we would never, we would never do anything to decrease the value or use a material that's not, saving money. This actually costs more money than channel letters. So if that's at all a concern, we're looking to go above standards instead of below, while still stay in line with.
So I think what we have going on here, so just to step back again, Mr. Scott.
Sure.
The group of people that are sitting here tonight and that are also online with us, we spent the better part of 2 years developing something called the UDO, Unified Development Ordinance. And within that, we spelled out a number of different things, not the least of which was signage. So as Mr. Dudek has correctly pointed out, the signage issue is a hot potato. And one of the things that I was going to ask Mr. Simmons is that we're not aware, and I'm not aware because I've sat here long enough, that we've created kind of precedent with something that you're requesting. I can't recall something like this personally, and I think Mr. Simmons did some research and said he can't find, even before I was here, some idea that we modify the signage like that. So my sensitivity around this is twofold. One is that we were very thoughtful in our UDO about signage, in trying not to create precedent, so that the next person that comes in said, did it for so-and-so, but now you won't do it for me. You must like firefighters more than you like policemen, right?
No, I don't. I like both of them.
Yeah.
But going back to the sign real quick, I completely understand where you're coming from. And talk about setting precedent, though. You kind of back the buildings in your village into a corner. If they have to maintain the same sign on all the building, that sign that was built with the building in 1984. Mm-hmm. The first tenant in that building was setting the precedent for the type of sign. Mm-hmm. So if we can increase and go forward and increase the value of the property with the type of signage, now you're just stagnant and you can't have a rising tide effect and the whole building can't grow.
So before I give you some other comments here, I just want to make sure that I'm giving the chance for the other ZPA members to comment. So for those of you that are joining us online, were there any other comments from Mr. Scott? The reason why I'm bringing up the UDO, Mr. Scott, is that you have come to a couple of meetings now, and I feel an obligation to tell you that, as Mr. Simmons said, that the decision that's made tonight, I don't know which way the decision will go, positively or negatively. But if it were to go negatively, it's ZPA final, which means that you could still proceed. You'd go to the village board with an appeal if it was declined. And if they declined it, that means you would have to wait 1 year. And I want to make sure that you're aware of that reality, because my suggestion to you, sir, was going to be you may want to consider speaking a little bit more with Mr. Simmons before we take a vote. And I don't mean tonight. I mean we can continue your case before you ask the committee here to vote. I don't know any which way people will vote, but I'd rather take a little bit of extra time to make sure that you're fully aware of what could transpire. Because if it goes in not your favor and it gets denied by the village board, you're waiting a year.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, I know how a few votes might go, but I would like to see all yeses, just because I like that community input. But we're quite confident in having the vote go tonight.
Okay?
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
A couple months ago, this board approved some signage for the animal doctor.
yes.
Those signs are not all the same. There's animal characters on one and then just block signage or block letters for the other two signs, all saying the animal doctor, which I didn't understand, and voted against at that time. But apparently this board had no problem with different kinds of signage on the same face of the building at that time.
So you'll refresh my memory on that one, Mr. Simmons. I thought the signage itself was block letters generally, kind of backlit block letters, and then there was a monument sign out front. That's my recollection.
Correct. So for that particular case, there were 5 signs, I believe, that were reviewed by the board. 2 of them were monument signs that were changeable electronic message center signs. And then they were requesting a variation for increasing the number of wall signs for the tenant, as Mr. Graziano had mentioned. 2 of the signs are individual channel letter signs, and the third sign that's in the center of the building has a background to it as far as a outline background, but still the lettering that's on it was individual letters, and I believe the center image of that sign was like an animal, if I recall. I think when we reviewed it, it was reviewed as predominantly the channel letter signs. It was the image for the tenant within the building. But I do understand, as Mr. Graziano is pointing out, that the signs don't match exactly from an aesthetic standpoint, but they're generally the construction of the signs were individual channel letters.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Thank you, Mr. Graziano. So, Mr. Scott, did you have a comment?
Yes,
Yeah.
really quick. You speak about landmark cases with signage in Kerry about our issue. If you look at Spirit Water,
Yes.
they have channel letters on one side of that building, and then on the same building they have I don't know the process that they went through to get that, but they have a metal laser cut sign, but it's different than ours is going to be. Theirs is kind of difficult to view from the side, which we've learned from that by seeing that, and we're not going to have it that far out or try to backlight it. We're just going to have it lit from the front. But that is one building that you have 2 different types of signage on, and I'm not sure if that went to zoning or not.
Not that sign. I remember the request. I think it was a conditional use.
Correct.
Yeah.
The sign didn't.
Yeah, the signage was not part of that request. Because I think there was a sign there before, but it wasn't obviously, it was a tile place. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a title place.
So gentlemen that are on this, on the Zoom call, additional questions for Mr. Scott?
Yeah, this is Pat Jasper.
Go ahead, Mr. Jasper.
Have you had any discussions with the other tenants of the building or the building owner about the existing signage, options for signage, your particular signage?
Absolutely, that was our first stop to get consensus from all the folks there. They wish us nothing but best wishes, and they couldn't be happier. And as well as the property owner, he's ecstatic about it.
He's actually not the property owner who was there when the channel letters were set as the precedent. He's a new property owner.
State your name for the record, please.
My name is Meredith Miller.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Appreciate it. So, Mr. Jasper, did that assuage your question?
Well, so there were, this is what we're going to do, and everybody said, great, but there was no discussion about overall signage, what how the different signages might affect the, I don't know, the rent, might affect, drawing attention to the businesses. There was no real business discussions around the signage as to whether it would be an advantage or a disadvantage in changing it or having a different
Was that a correct question directed towards me? Are you asking if you wanted, if we, I mean, we sent out the mailers as requested, and it was in the paper, and there was a sign, a monument sign there. And we know that on a personal level, we know the surrounding folks as well, and nobody has expressed concern. Only they've expressed good thoughts about the sign.
So, Mr. Jasper, I don't want to speak for you, but I think Mr. Jasper's question might be, and Mr. Jasper, correct me, I think he's asking, did they understand what the signage was going to look like? I think that's the question.
That's part of it.
The property owner did. The surrounding folks, the ones immediately to the left and right of us knew about that, and then Meredith can speak for the Modern Wave. She shared a few pictures with them. There was no formal document of the picture other than the village zoning meeting, which they had the opportunity to attend if it was a concern of theirs right now.
So, Mr. Jasper, if you want to continue your questions, please do so.
Yeah, I guess the answer to my question was no. I mean, as far as, and I'm putting words in the petitioner's mouth here, but as far as my question goes, the tenants don't think that the difference in signage is going to have any effect on their businesses, and the building owner doesn't seem to have an opinion as to whether that values or devalues, increases in value or devalues his property. And unless you have something to add to that, my question's been asked and answered.
Was there another concern that you wanted to ask while you have us here? Or did we answer that appropriately to your liking?
Well, I mean, you've had conversations with your neighbors as regards the zoning the process here, but not really to the effect of change in signage on your business or their businesses or the value of the property.
You're speaking as if our sign is going to raise their rent because it raises the value of the property over time.
It could, or it could, for whatever reason, end up devaluing it because the property doesn't look as cohesive now. And I don't know which way it's going to go. I'm just saying that's, that to me that would have been, as the building owner, that's one of the first things I would have done when you brought it to me is look at it and say, what's it going to do to the value of my building? Can I get more money out of this? Am I going to get less money out of this? Am I going to have all my tenants wanting to do this? Am I going to have to be contributing to, purchasing signage? I mean, there's a lot of business conversation in there that I would have thought had gone on.
Oh, absolutely. It has gone on with the business owner. With the property owner. He's very he puts a lot of forethought into things. Speaking of Patrick Rowley, he looked at the designs, he looked at the folks that are manufacturing the sign, and I brought him material samples, and he was ecstatic about it, about having a tenant in there after a year of vacancy, as well as another sign on the other frontage. So to answer your question, I believe it's going to be the first of the two. I think it's going to raise, if not, it's going to raise the overall perception of the area as well as the value of the building, to whereas the folks around us had no concern at all about any hardship they might incur from our sign.
Mr. Jasper, did you have additional questions you'd like to ask?
No, not that are going to go anywhere.
Okay. Gentlemen that are joining us online or that are in the Village Hall, additional questions?
I just would like to go back to the first comment that I made, because I don't know that I heard you address it, but have you thought about, or is it possible for you to scale your sign down to be able to have some sort of happy medium between what our code says and what you're requesting?
Are you speaking of the size of the sign?
I'm talking about having block letters for the name of your business with some sort of, smaller sign to kind of incorporate, like the Allstate sign, your logo. That's all.
That was an initial consideration of the Allstate logo that they have there, with how they have the logo vinyl printed on plastic. That was quickly dismissed, though, because we wanted to have a better premium material for that corner lot. I could see a concern if ours was in a row of 8 and we're in lot 3 and there's no corner. This is a corner unit that is also defined by the little circular sides. So it kind of stands on its own a little bit. So one could even argue that it's not part of the same area, and we could somehow have that be a way there. But we just didn't want to have the vinyl and the channel letters because of the brand standards I mentioned before, and because of the quality of materials and how long we're planning on staying with the building.
Let me follow up with that just a little bit.
Sure.
The very corner, is it sort of a 3-piece where you have, two angle walls, one on Kerry Algonquin and one on Industrial, and then sort of a panel that joins the two in the front? In other words, not a 90-degree peak, but there's something that, like right at the very center?
The corner is rounded, if that's
It's
what you're
rounded,
asking.
okay. Because I was thinking perhaps that would be an ideal place. I'm not a fan, and I'm not suggesting at all.
We love all feedback, so please.
I'm not suggesting that your logo goes on some cheap plastic. I really like what you want to do with the sign, but I think what
Thank
you're
you.
hearing from at least some people is that these are rules. I mean, you're a fireman. You know what rules and regulations are for the businesses in town. They can't do certain things inside their 4 walls, at least not without getting in trouble. In our case, we have rules and regulations as it relates to signage. I think the committee, at least me, would like to find a happy medium. I'd like you to be successful. I'd like you to have a cool sign. This is a cool sign. It just doesn't
Thank you.
fit the letter of the law.
So to be clear, your concern is that it's a nice sign. You don't have an issue with materials being used or how it looks or appears. Your concern is the overall continuity of the other tenants having the vinyl metal channel letters.
I'm not as concerned about the continuity with the tenants as I am the continuity with our code. If our code
Very
says
good.
one thing, that's what we've got to try to match that.
Very good.
And Mr. Scott, I was going to ask this question earlier, that you were mentioning the tenants, and I just want to make sure, because it is a matter of our record. When you talk about the tenants, are you talking about the people that would be like yourself, that are kind of the proprietors, or just the employees? I just want to make sure for the record we're talking about people that are running those businesses, that are responsible for that business.
Yes, the building, the business owners of the businesses that are part of that property.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, gentlemen, so I want to make sure I'm giving everybody a bite at the apple. Gentlemen that are joining us via Zoom, the ZPA members, are there any questions or comments that you may have? Or additional questions? All right, so what I need to do now, Mr. Scott, is that I need to open it up to the public to see if there's anyone online that would like to comment on this. There's no one now in Village Hall except the petitioner that would potentially offer public comment.
Still have one resident that's logged in online. If they'd like to speak, they can raise the hand or use the chat feature. I don't see any questions that have been submitted to date.
Nothing. So So, Mr. Scott, before I call the motion here, I just want to make sure that I'm double checking with yourself that you're comfortable with us calling a vote. You don't want to review it any further with Mr. Simmons?
No,
based upon the
absolutely, we are,
feedback?
absolutely, we're comfortable having the vote go to today. But just to play devil's advocate, Patrick, if you were to approve this, if the board was to approve this today, say that they can, that you allow us to put this sign up, is that going to be, because I have great respect for the code as well, like I share that with Mr. Dudek. So is that going to allow other businesses, is that going to be a landmark case today to where other businesses, like say somebody in the Jewel Osco strip can just put a $40 banner up instead of a $4,000 sign? Is that
Well,
going to set that precedent?
Let me
Because we don't want
answer the
that.
question a different way, because I have no idea which way the vote will go.
Okay.
But let's assume, for the sake of your discussion, it does get approved. And then someone like Jewel comes over, they can say a precedent was set. And I think that's really what Mr. Dudek is saying, is that we have kind of a procedure with the UDO and the signage. Conversely, if it doesn't get approved by the ZPA, it is final. This is a new part of the UDO. It's a new part of the UDO. So what that means is that you theoretically would have to wait a year. However, you could go to the village board and make your case again, and they could overturn what we say here tonight. So that's possible.
When we get the yes vote, is that going to, for future cases, are future businesses going to have to come and go through the same process, or is that going to become part of Kerry Village Code?
No.
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 No?
So the code would still
So
remain.
that would still be on a case-by-case basis till a yes or no vote?
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah,
Then we're comfortable with it going to a vote. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so gentlemen, before I call this, is there any additional questions that you'd like to address before I call the motion? Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve a variance for 2 inconsistent wall signs in a multi-tenant building for Hometown Scoop Inc., doing business in Kerry Dairy Ice Cream Cafe for the property located at 395 Kerry Algonquin Road, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Simmons,
yeah,
and I'm
just-
assuming there was no one that came through online,
Correct,
so
no.
I needed to close the public portion. So the
Correct.
public portion is now closed.
Yeah. And just to verify, so a positive or vote in the affirmative would be supporting the variance. When we call roll call, a negative vote from a board member would be against the variance request.
Understood. Any questions about that, gentlemen? And just so there's no confusion, Mr. Simmons, state that again.
So if, when the roll call is called, a vote of yes would be for support of the variance request for the inconsistent wall signs. A vote of no would be recommendation against the variance request.
Thank you very much. Any questions about that, gentlemen? It's pretty straightforward. Okay, Mr. Simmons, would you call the roll?
Sure. Graziano?
Yes.
Jasper? Jasper, you're muted.
No,
Dudek?
No.
O'Loughlin?
No.
Williams?
Yes.
Kretschmer?
No.
Corey?
No. So unfortunately, you have a negative recommendation. However, you do have a process to appeal this decision tonight. And the process is to stay very close in touch with Mr. Simmons, and then this would go before the village board at your request, because it is a village ZPA case final at this level, and you would appeal this decision to our elected officials. So I do want to say, sir, I want to wish you success with your business, though.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
If this was a electronic message board, would this have been approved today or no?
I'm not sure I've seen that type of,
But you said you can only do monument signs.
Correct. We changed the
Okay.
code, so those are no longer permitted for wall signs.
Thank you to all of you.
yeah.
I'll certainly give you information if it's something that you do wish to appeal to the village board, what the process is for that. So if you do want to continue that to the next level, certainly work with you from there.
Okay.
And Mr. Scott, one other comment I can leave you with, you can have a discussion with Mr. Simmons and potentially before you present, if that comes to pass, to modify what you presented to us. That's well within your right to do that.
Okay, thank you to all of you.
Yep, thank you, and good luck.
Mr. Court, can I just,
Yeah.
I just wanted to give this, because I'm not an artist, but this is what I was trying to describe. So I would have to drive, I drove by your property today before the meeting. I didn't stop to do any measurements. But that was what I was, take it with you, please. And that way you have another thing to think about. But if that curve that you were describing isn't very big, it likely wouldn't even,
That does look nice.
I think it
Would
would
that get
look,
approved?
I think would, well, it's what I kind of suggested as a, you can do the same thing.
Is this a laser cut?
Yes, it is. With one light right in the middle, right in the corner where you can see
You would have
that.
said yes to this, but not art?
I actually made it as a suggestion to you.
This
but-
is very nice, though. No ice cream cone, no.
No, I mean, that was just my 5-minute drawing.
What-
Put your ice cream cone at your logo.
Okay.
That was just my
No, this
suggestion,
is
that's
very
all.
nice. No, this is very nice. Thank you.
I always like to try to have a happy medium.
I think we found that today.
Good.
Thank you very much.
And
You're
Mr. Scott, I will say thank you for what you're doing
It's
on
very
behalf,
hard right now. And,
well, with the
you know,
fire
it's-
department and
Yeah.
your new business.
No,
And,
no thank yous necessary to the
well,
fire department,
yeah.
but, this was a small setback, but we plan on still moving forward and bringing money into the town of Kerry. So thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you, and
Good
wish you
luck.
both a happy Thanksgiving. All right, gentlemen, so I do know that we're going to have a continuation to December 10th that we discussed. And Mr. Simmons, was there any other meetings coming down the pike that you wanted us to be aware of, or any petitions?
No petitions have been submitted yet, so the one item that's been continued likely will be the only case on the agenda for that evening, pending the second submittal coming in. But otherwise, nothing coming before Thanksgiving.
Okay. So, gentlemen, before I ask for an adjournment, anything else on your mind that you'd like to discuss? I will wish all of you and your families a very happy Thanksgiving,
Same to you.
and thank you for your help tonight. And with that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, gentlemen.